Hi, Matt here. I thought I'd give a little talk on this area of philosophy quite often neglected, called personal identity. So it's the study of the concept of personal identity, what it means, and how it bears on our existence as thinking beings. So there was a great book that I read on this at university. It was imaginatively named Personal Identity. It was by John Perry, and it brought together a load of sort of theories and ideas around personal identity from a bunch of really really big thinkers. So there was I think it was sort of John Locke, Anthony Quinton, H.P. Grice, and their offering was to suggest that personal identity rested on memory, right? So this sense of a sort of continuing set of associated events associated by their connection with this central kind of orchestrating self, if you like. So there's this a bunch of memories that all include this entity that I regard as myself, right? So it's identification with memories essentially. So you might argue that a person is therefore the sort of sum total of everything that's ever happened to them, right? And I mean, obviously, there's some really really kind of interesting challenges to this because, of course, people render themselves in a particular way, and there's a particular overarching narrative or strategy about their story, and they might re-render some of those memories according to the requirements of that narrative, right? So there's this sort of self-referential lensing or kind of refraction, according to some kind of target, sort of conceptual sort of social morphology or something maybe. And but there's other perspectives offered in there as well. So I think sort of Joseph Butler in there, Sydney Shoemaker, and this problem of I think some of the features of the Locke position were kind of held on to, but there would but I think there was some criticism about this problem of circularity. But where are my thoughts on this these days? It's all well and good going over some old book that I read at university, but what do I think now? And my position has just altered dramatically just in the last few years from being exposed to the likes of Hoffman and Friston and Mike Levin and so on, because they just they seem to have completely disturbed the waters of understanding. I mean, I think I was in this place where I thought, well, there is a mind. We just haven't figured out how to define it yet. There is an identity. We just haven't, completely comprehended what it means yet. And so all of these things will be figured out at some point, and it makes sense because they slot very nicely into our kind of sort of quite highly controlled, regulated sort of identity-driven society, right? It's all about the information, a list of facts, and people even talk. I think some of these philosophies of personal identity trickle into the mainstream. The man on the street kind of actually says things like, well, life is about gathering experiences. It's about, accumulating positive memories. Going abroad and seeing the Taj Mahal and going to the pyramids and so on and so forth. It's about the quality of those memories that you accumulate, right? And that seemed to fit very nicely within that sort of standard, minded kind of sentient being kind of model that we used to have. But now I'm finding that there's so much by way of sort of collective intelligence that sits within our kind of the system we call being human, that I can't, it just seems incongruous to regard myself as a fixed continuing individual. I just don't think that's the case anymore, and I think that this idea of the self model, where we not only have to have a working account of the external, and I'm saying that in inverted commas, external world, we also have to have a continuing model of ourselves, right? And in some sense, those two things are sort of equivalent, aren't they? Because the information we're getting from our own bodies is essentially our world, isn't it? Because that's kind of all that's relevant. I don't care what's going on in Salisbury right now because it's not interacting with my body. It's the stuff nearby, it's local phenomena that concerns us because it has a direct impact on our bodies, right? I mean, there may be some causal chains, the butterfly flaps its wings and so on and so forth, but fundamentally, the world is what's happening to my body. So you could almost kind of ignore that, sort of. conceptually just say, well, we don't really know about that external realm. All we know about it are these things, and I suppose that then we map them against information that we get. So if put my hand in a flame, it burns, right? So I've got the information. There's a flame there, and I can that becomes part of my sort of world model, I suppose. That this account of the external world that maps into my internal sort of boundary, if you like, with some Markovian boundary or kernel, and gives me the information I need, right? I'm not sure I'm making much sense of it, but I think the point is that the this identity thing, much as the story that we tell ourselves seems to contain this continuing entity called, in my case, Matt Gray. That's probably not what is really happening, and again, that's just some sort of heuristic solution to problems that face entities like me, right? And it's a helpful thing to have this continuum of activities, but we know that that isn't always present in certain individuals, right? And indeed, well, some individuals have multiple um, personal continuums. In the case of multiple personality disorder and so on and so forth. So I'm not. I think the identity is a much more fluid and vague thing than I used to think. But I think the John Wheeler, is it, who came up with thoughts are thinkers, and some of the clarification of that notion from Mike Levin lately has really got me thinking, and in very much the same sense that the human body has competing and cooperating forms within it. We know for a fact that organs compete for resources during embryonic development and so on. And the same seems to be true for our very psychology, whatever that is. Okay. And in the idea that these memes, these internal voices or kind of conceptual creatures of a sort, have agency, right? So, you know, thoughts are thinkers. So in that sense as well, you just even for ordinary human experience, no psychedelics, meditation, just anyone can see that there's certain narratives that seem to gather their own weight, and we don't necessarily want to hear them, but they're there, right? And some of those can get so out of hand that people end up having sort of unwanted thoughts and sort of unpleasant inner voices and so on and so forth. And that seems to be it's quite a common thing, and it does seem to be an extension of that very subtle sort of inner dissociation that it's already there. We have to accept that we're continuously re-rendering ourselves according to what seems to be beneficial, probably in some kind of sort of Darwinistic way, right? Just as you can imagine sort of like a single cell creature throwing out his arm to sort of see if it can find food or test for, gain information about its environment. That's kind of what we're doing. And I think that we're beginning to see science and certainly reasoning that is well, beginning to confirm some of those intuitions. So, there it is. I mean, I've probably got a hell of a lot more to say on this, but I've got a meeting shortly. This is just a sort of lunch break talk. Personal identity is not, a done deal. I mean, it's just obvious to say that it's something to do with memory, isn't it? Because, these are the past experiences that we're talking about at a more sort of deep level within these kind of biophilosophical concepts, right? So anyway, I'd strongly recommend Personal Identity by John Perry because it pulls together a load of different lines of attack on this stuff. I mean, it talks about things like the whole body transfer and what that says about things. Thomas Nagel's in there. It's a really, really good book. And of course, actually, I think John Perry himself, I think there's a paper from him in there as well. So the guy who put the collection together is obviously an expert on this area, has actually written an essay or a paper in there as well. So yeah, strongly recommend that as a starting point if you're interested in this area. But really, probably just watch a whole load of some of the Mike Levin academic content because this stuff is being discussed all the time. What is an agent? And yeah, I think the answer to that may give us some insight into what we mean by identity. Anyway, speak soon. Take care. Bye.